Hi.
Exciting.
So this is Blake and Emily, and we're going to be talking about Chapter 3 of Consciousness Explained Better by Alan Combs. And I guess the intention of this is to talk about how it relates to evolutionary enlightenment teachings, and just have fun with this and see where it goes. So we're going to be talking about
Yeah,
Chapter 3. So
perfect.
do you want to start off Chapter 3, or what do you think?
Sure. The first thing that pops out about chapter 3 is he's talking about reflective awareness, and he's talking about how we come to know the world that we're in. And the first big distinction that he makes is what's called, what does he call it? The naive thing. Where is it?
Naive realism? Yeah.
Yes, naive realism, where our sensory input is the basis and end all and be all of reality.
Yeah.
And he said that more specifically, Wilber's philosophy is based on the idea that our experience is based on perceptions. And the three main ones that he outlined were the perceptions of ourselves, the perceptions of others, and the perception of the world around us.
Yeah, I see. Um, before that, I'm just kind of thinking, right at the beginning of the chapter. Just kind of the background of it was just like that. He's talking about the different perceptions, right, as being a fundamental part of experience. That there's
Mm-hmm.
multiple perspectives, and I guess yeah, basically what you're talking about is, the division between inner and outer.
Mm-hmm.
As the it seems like he basically says it's the pretty much it seems pretty simple and it seems pretty much intuitive, but these things have been talked about, philosophized several times. Yeah.
What I think he's really getting at is giving a context for this quadratic approach that you see in,
Yeah.
and he takes the quadratic approach, but not from a structure perspective, from a process perspective. But so the basis that he, and what he's arguing for is that, or not arguing for, but pointing out is that this model wasn't something that Ken Wilber just made up out of thin air. He took all of accumulated knowledge and he was trying to make all of it fit in one paradigm. So it wasn't like he was sitting by a river one day and had an epiphany. He actually looked at all the collected forms of human understanding, and the exact use was he was looking for an architecture of knowledge. So
Yeah.
this is something that's based on the available information in a way to encompass all of it, not the other way around.
And so yeah, what you're talking about is that Ken Wilber split it up in basically what we were talking about is the quadrant, right? The inner, outer, plural, and wow, what am I trying to think?
Singular.
Singular and plural. Basically, those kind of divisions. Um, but you said something like you said a process perspective or process philosophy versus maybe a structural philosophy. What did you mean by that? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
So
Or,
yeah, it makes sense. And some of this is going to be conjecture since he hasn't fully explored this yet. But he has stated in the previous chapters that he does take some major. He and Wilber's philosophies do have some major differences, and this one of the big ones was that and Wilber's was structure. This was a process perspective. So he hasn't fleshed out fully, but I'm thinking that it draws back from the information chapter 2, where he's talking about the only way to fully experience all of reality is to come at it from a process perspective, from being inside the process of life instead of trying to look at the events of life.
mm,
So I'm thinking that he's going to make some fundamental argument about how, coming from a structure perspective, sort of doesn't fully express sort of that undercurrent of reality that he was drawing on after.
That makes sense. It's good thought. Just a sense of, when I do read Ken Wilber, yeah, it does seem like, just I guess in his way of talking and his way of describing things, it is that kind of one step back, like that, more structural, and I'm not sure, like it's kind of a very subtle point, right? Process
Yeah.
versus, um, yeah, that's an interesting thought, just to kind of consider, like, obviously, well, there's the, what do you call it, when they split it up into eight, right? Do you know what I mean? What's that called? The
When they split
conjivia?
up into what?
Well, he talks about the quadrants, right? So that's the split up into four. That's inner, outer,
Mm-hmm.
its and its, or it and
Yeah.
its. But then they go into conjivia. Was that how you pronounce it? But anyway,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But
Yeah.
that's just interesting to talk about because I think that's sort of what you're talking about when you talk about process. I mean, process and structural, because in some ways, that's when you see the inner and outer of each quadrant. Does that make sense? Um,
Yeah.
is that how you make sense of and what you read?
That's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. So the quadrivia is instead of looking at it from a 50,000 foot view, you're like this goes in the left. Looking at it from how the experience actually looks if you're coming from the upper left. So that's the quadrivia you're talking about, right?
Yeah,
So you
I
actually take on the perspective of what it looks like from the inside out. That's how I understood it.
yeah, and I mean that stuff. Like, I've read Ken Wilber, and I mean obviously that's like, and that's a pretty in depth stuff. I think. I mean,
Hmm.
I haven't studied him as much to know all about that, but it is interesting. Like in the one book, Integral Spirituality, he talks about integral math, right? And like there's like these perspectives on perspectives, um, and how all the quadrants, just basically giving you more perspectives on it. Um, but anyway, maybe that's getting a little bit off topic. But